Hey guys, what's up? It's your little Asian girl Kanna here today. Welcome to my channel. Today I want to share with you how I got 119 on my TOEFL score. So we're gonna start with the reading section. The first tip that I have for you is to go onto Google search and find yourself TPO 1 through 54. TPO means TOEFL Practice Online. They are old TOEFL tests that are not currently being used in the actual test. So they're the closest things that you can get to practice your TOEFL. You can splurge on buying TOEFL workbooks, but they're pretty pricey. And if you're a student and you're on a budget, you can find free resources. The second tip that I have for you is when you find the TPO, don't just dive in and do a mock test after another one. What you want to do is organize all of the reading passages into subjects. You'll find that there is general subjects like ancient civilization, biology, geography, psychology, history, industrialization. These are hot topics that pop up in the TOEFL reading a lot. And what you want to do is after you organize them, try to do some of each and then find out which are the ones that are your weaknesses. So for me, it's always been science. I didn't take a lot of science courses during high school. So what I did was before I took the test, I started to really focus on doing only subjects that were related to science. And at first I got a lot of incorrect answers and there were a lot of vocabularies that I needed to look up, and that's why I think I was able to get full score on my reading section. So I definitely recommend that if you are preparing for TOEFL, you definitely want to find your weaker subject in the reading section and just work on it. Okay, so moving on to the third tip I have for you, and it's regarding the vocabulary. You definitely want to have flashcards with you. For beginners, I recommend the Princeton Review 500 Flashcards Essential TOEFL Vocabulary, and it's the second edition. I think they did a really good job. They're very well made. So in each card, they have, of course, the word, and at the back of the card, they have the explanation and an example sentence and synonyms. Oh, and sorry, I forgot to mention that in the front of the card, they also write down the way you can pronounce it. If you're like a student, this can really save your time because making flashcards can be very time consuming. But if you're an advanced learner like me, then these would definitely not work for you. They would be a little too simple. So, you would probably need to make your own. Now, moving on to the second part of the vocab. It's a little extreme, but what I do is I test myself every single day of the vocabs that I learned. If I learned, say, 15 vocabularies from day one, I would test myself these 15 vocabularies for, say, 7 to 10 days before I kind of delete them from my test paper. If you're from a non-English speaking country, if you learn new words, you wouldn't really have any chance to use them in your daily life. But the thing is with vocabulary, if you don't use them, you're going to forget them really quickly. Even if you have like lists and lists of vocabs written down in your notebook, or if you have thousands of flashcards, it's not going to be able to help you if you can't memorize them here. So you want to really push yourself, force your brain to think of that specific word by repeatedly testing yourself frequently enough to allow the brain to remember it. The fourth tip that I have for you is you want to familiarize yourself with all of the reading questions. I'm not going to dive into how many questions there are and what type of questions there are in the TOEFL reading section. This can be another video. If you want to see my tips and tricks, leave a comment down below. I would be happy to make another video on that. But for today, just remember, you want to be familiar with all of the test questions. And just like organizing all the reading subjects, you want to find your weaknesses in those question types. The final tip that I have for you, it's from my personal experience and experience with my students, is when you're doing the reading section, you can try quickly translating that into your native language. You might think like, oh, Kanna, that's gonna take so long. I don't have time to like translate the whole thing. Well, when you're first preparing for the TOEFL test, it's not always about speed. It's more about being able to comprehend what you're reading. So by kind of reading a sentence and asking yourself whether you understand and be able to translate that into your own native language, you're kind of making sure you are understanding the paragraph. Or you might be just pronouncing all the words, but not necessarily thinking in your mind. Sometimes when you don't do this step, you end up having to go to that question, realize that you're kind of blanked out, and then you have to go back and read it again, and you might end up having to read the same paragraph 3 to 4 times and get really frustrated. If you're able to translate what you've read into your native language, then you definitely understood what you have read. But if you can't verbalize what you have read into your native language, then you probably have some concepts that you really didn't quite get. I do find that it's really helpful. All right, moving on to listening. I hope you're still here. I'm gonna keep it short. So for the listening section, I think the most important thing that you have to know is that there is going to be a lot of lectures, and there's going to be a lot of information that you're going to have to write down. If you've done mock tests, you probably know this by now, that if you write a whole sentence or you try to write down the whole lecture, it's not going to work. So the most important thing here for the listening section is you have to come up with your own note-taking methods. So for instance, you have to use a lot of abbreviations and symbols. Like for instance, increase or decrease, you want to use plus, like the plus symbol. Or for because, you don't want to write down because, you probably want to write BC. So there are a lot of websites that teach you how to do speed note takings. You definitely want to look up on these and find a way that you're most comfortable with when you're doing the listening section, that you can quickly write down notes. And another thing that I want to mention is that when you're writing down the notes, you want to make sure you write down as many details as possible, because I find that TOEFL really likes to test you on those really small details. So if you're not really paying attention and you didn't write that down, it would be really hard for you to remember all those details, and then you might end up having to guess that question and get it wrong. The second tip that I have for you is you want to train yourself to be able to pay attention to the lectures for about 15 to 30 minutes. There are 2 dialogues and 4 lectures in a whole listening section, so it's actually quite long. It's very likely that you might doze off. That's what happened to me in my last test. I fell asleep I think for maybe 20 seconds, and I ended up having to guess I think around 2 to 3 questions. I think that's what caused one of my scores to be deducted, and I got 29 on my listening. If you're a person that falls asleep a lot during the mock test, you definitely want to make sure that you try to stay awake and take your mock test seriously. Know what to expect when you're taking the test. The last tip that I have for you for the listening section is definitely watch or listen to as much BBC Earth, National Geography, and a TV show called Trust Me, I Am a Doctor. The reason why I recommend this to you is because there are multiple times when I have taken the mock test or went to take the test. The concepts that have been mentioned are concepts that I have heard of being mentioned on these specific channels. For instance, the program Trust Me, I Have a Doctor has covered a topic on dementia. Dementia is actually mentioned in earlier TPOs. If you watch a lot of these channels, even if you might not understand the whole reading passage, or you might not understand a lot of the things that are being said in the lecture, but because you've heard a similar topic in that channel, you probably can make a better guess of the correct answer. For the TOEFL speaking section, the first tip that I have for you is you want to practice speaking the TOEFL style. You get a really short time to demonstrate your abilities. The time allocated for you is around 6.5 minutes. It's relatively shorter than other language assessment tests like IELTS, which gives you around 14 to 15 minutes, I believe. So if you don't speak really structurally, you won't be able to clearly demonstrate all of your speaking abilities, and that would give you a relatively lower score compared to other test takers. So what you want to do is, if you're not from an English-speaking country, you can go online and look for TOEFL speaking templates. You know, a lot of people, when they hear templates, they get really sensitive and they say like, oh, don't use templates. You know, you're going to get a low score because the scorers are going to know that you're using a template. Here's the thing. I think that the most important thing is you have the right attitude when you're using a template. A lot of people, when they memorize templates, they just use the whole exact same thing in every single question types. So sometimes if their English ability isn't enough, it's really obvious that you're using the template. You can start by using the template, but gradually as you get better, you want to start to substitute a lot of vocabs or sentence structures. You can change it up a little bit and make it into your own style. If you go through this process, there won't be any problems of you learning from templates, because you're going to end up with your own speaking style, but have the structure that is expected to get a very high score. The second tip that I have for you is you really want to time yourself when you're preparing for the TOEFL test. I think what's less mentioned is the way you allocate your speaking time. So for instance, for number 5, you have to state a problem that the speaker has encountered and also 2 options that the speaker has. Then you also have to talk about what you would do if you were that speaker. A lot of the test takers, they would focus on speaking like a full 60 seconds, and if they do, they feel like they're done. But what you also want to know is when you have to allocate your time correctly. So I think the best way to do this is you spend 30 seconds explaining the problems and the pros and cons of the 2 solutions, and then you spend 30 seconds talking about what you would do if you were the speaker. Now, if you give it like a solid 30 seconds of both parts, some experience of people getting higher scores when they do this. So you definitely want to not only finish within the time frame, but also be able to allocate the time that's given to you into equal sections. The last tip that I have for you, which is the most important one, is you want to practice reasoning every single day while you're on the street, in the bathroom, or when you're at work. Because one of the biggest problems that a lot of test takers have is not grammar. I think is because you fail to come up with a lot of ideas when you're faced with the question. You definitely want to practice reasoning. Like for instance, you can walk on the street and if you see like a convenience store, you can ask yourself like, what's good about a convenience store? And ideally, whenever you ask yourself a question, you want to come up with 2 reasons. So for me, I test my students during class, like really randomly, like we would be in the middle of a discussion and I would ask them like, so what do you think of these flashcards? And they would have to give me 2 reasons of why they think this is good, or whether they suck. And they would have to tell me within maybe say 10 seconds. The thing that you want to remember is that these reasons, they don't have to be true. They don't have to be something that you've experienced. ETS Center does not judge you on whether you're intelligent enough or whether these reasons are knowledgeable. They just want to make sure that you can speak the language. So definitely keep that in mind. All right, the last section is the writing section. Now, just like the speaking section, I do recommend that you guys look for writing templates. And again, I must remind you guys, these templates should not be memorized and used in every single essay that you write, but more so as a jumpstart for you to understand the structure of the essay. So for a lot of test takers that are not from English-speaking countries, you're probably not familiar with writing academic essays. By having the templates, you kind of get like a clearer understanding of what the structure should be like. And after you're familiarized with the structure, definitely substitute the vocabularies or alter the sentence structures a little bit and change it into your own style. After you're done with that, you can spend more time on constructing the content of your essay. And you'd probably be able to finish within the time frame. The second tip that I have for you is when you're organizing your writing materials, memorize some of the phrases or sentence structures that you feel is beneficial for your writing, and you want to try to incorporate that into your own essay. I used to write sentences like there has been a lot of debate on, or it has been debated for a very long time that. So these are more common sentences. There was this one writer that wrote, there has been a constant drumbeat for ... and that stuck. So whenever I'm writing, TOEFL essays, I think this is a great sentence to start instead of using there has been a lot of debate on. Definitely try to find a lot of the articles that are from different subject areas, memorize them, and whenever you're writing your own essays, definitely try to use a little bit of that phrase or the sentence structures. And you know what? If you do that for a certain period of time, your writing will definitely improve and you'll get a really good score on your TOEFL test. Alrighty, so that is all I have for you today of how I got 119 on my TOEFL score. I hope you liked the video and found the tips useful. If you did, hit the like button and share some love. If you like my channel and you want to see more videos on language assessment tests and learning English in general, feel free to subscribe and hit the bell so you can see my future uploads. I'll keep my fingers crossed for you when you're taking the TOEFL test. See you soon. Bye.